The very first thing that I'll point out is that it's cool in here. That's the new motto for the modern yeoman. We'll see how it works. It happened, guys. Welcome back to the Homestead. I'm Sean, the modern yeoman, and as you can see, we got our attic room sprayed. And I got a lot of thoughts on it. The whole process, how it feels in here now. I want to talk through all of that stuff and kind of give you a grand tour of this tiny room, this newly foamed over tiny room. But before we do, I thought I'd bring back an old format, and that's the monthly Homestead walk around and update, where I walk around the homestead, give you updates on all the things that we're doing. Now is a good time to do it because spring is here officially. I'd say summer is here, honestly, with how warm it is. Why don't you come with me as we walk around and talk about all the different things that are popping here on the Homestead this month. And then we'll skip, if you want to skip ahead while I talk about the roof stuff, if you're interested in foaming your roof, I'll have chapters in the description below and you can skip ahead to the hot roof talk a little bit later in the episode. But if you want to join me and walk around the Homestead for a little ramble, let's go. Before I talk about anything else, I wanted to give a quick update on my mosquito buckets. Now you go back a few videos, I talk about how I was a little disillusioned the first time I did the mosquito bucket method, but I was giving it another go this year with a few tweaks that I think will make a pretty big difference. I'm doing this earlier in the season, focusing my bucket program here on the homemaker while I go back into the back pasture and the woods, and I just walk around and sprinkle those bits, those mosquito bits, into all the puddles. And so far I've done that. And one thing I've noticed, I didn't notice it last year, is that these buckets are loaded with mosquito eggs already. So it's a good thing I set out my bucket. There aren't really any mosquitoes bugging us actively when we're out walking around, but I know that just give it a few weeks and they'd be bugging us and the mosquito season will have started. But apparently we've nipped this in the bud very early. Check this out. See all these little black dots? See if I can zoom in. But these little black dots that you see, those are all, believe it or not, those are egg piles that the mosquitoes lay. I think there's a row of eggs, and each one of these black, they look like miniature grains of rice. They're loaded with rows of mosquito eggs. And so the bits in here that you see are the actual poison to the mosquitoes. This is what, when the larvae consume the water that's been treated with these little bacteria bits, they die. And so, yeah, there's a mosquito right there. Can you see it? Actively laying eggs. There's probably 3 dozen mosquito egg dots in here, which would equate to hundreds and hundreds of individual mosquitoes, maybe thousands of individual mosquitoes. Each one of those mosquitoes, their female, will lay their own pile of eggs. So I've walked around all the buckets and they're loaded with these things. I didn't see that type of egg-laying activity last year when I put out the bucket. So I think I'm squelching this problem early. This is an encouraging update for me because, as I mentioned a few videos ago, our mosquito problem last year was out of control, especially with little Henry running around. He couldn't be out here 5 minutes without just getting covered in mosquito welts. Here's my goal: make all the water on our property, or as much of it as I can, poisonous to mosquitoes. They'll lay their eggs will hatch, but they'll never grow up because the larva will die. So far I've been really thorough. It's kind of nice to just come out here with Henry, look at puddles, and just throw the stuff in every puddle that we see. It's a fun little bonding activity that we do together. So we'll see if it works. I'll give you guys updates on it. So far, I'm optimistic.
We'll have to kind of finagle getting the wire. But the wire wouldn't even need to penetrate the wood, right? You just have it going up.
And I'd prefer not to do that to the wood.
And then we can just twist it tight. Does that make sense?
So, plan is take a wire through that hole, bring it through here, and secure it on the other side with the twist. Easy.
Well, we'll see. It should be.
And now we just tighten the sucker up. Might be something with my hand that might be easier for you. And then we can clip off the ends. That ought to do it.
Yeah.
The drippage will be minimal, acceptable amount. It's pretty.
Oh yeah.
The wind, kind of am hoping for another gust to come through just to.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to have a problem. All right.
Next update, our free-range chickens and the garden. Two subjects that I'm afraid won't get along too well, especially after we plant our fresh new veggie starts. Tender, young veggie starts that are maybe just off the ground. And I've been trying to think of a solution that I can use to keep our free-range chickens out of the garden once we plant here in the next few weeks. Which, side note, it's early April, and I was at the nursery today, and there's a ton of people buying stuff, and I think a lot of people are putting stuff in the ground because it's hot. Right now it's almost 90 degrees Fahrenheit today. It's really warm, and so a lot of people are like, all right, let's go. But in the next few days, it's actually going to dip below freezing. This always happens in April. It gets really warm, then it gets really cold again. So we're waiting till the last week of April, first week of May to put our plants in the ground. Now, before we do that, this is where I worry about the chickens. What am I going to do? I have to build an entire fence or buy a new Premier 1 fence and put it over? Well, there's a couple issues with that. So as I've talked about in previous videos, we've kind of given up to the fact that we have free-range chickens. The genie is out of the bottle. And so you may come back to me and you say, well, clip their wings. We could clip their wings. However, these smaller black chickens, which are great egg layers, by the way, they lay all over the homestead, but they're really prolific egg layers. They can slip through the fence. Maybe she'll do it for you right here, maybe not. They can actually just jump through right here, squeeze open through there. So they can fit through the fence, this Premier 1 fence. So even if I clip their wings and they don't fly over, they'll just squeeze through the fence when they want to get out. Get a new fence. Okay, maybe, but that's several $100s, a big investment, lots of time. Do we even want to do that just to keep a handful of free-range chickens out? Or is there an easier way to deal with this? Option number 2, put a fence around the garden, but instead of using this Premier 1 stuff, use something a little more heavy-duty, or maybe like hardware cloth. And that's something that's a route that I think eventually we are going to take. That'll take some planning, that'll take some investment, that'll take some time. I don't know if we can get a whole fence up with all the other projects that we have in time before we get our veggie starts. How can I buy some time? And that's when I thought of what's called cloches. I think I'm pronouncing it right. Cloches are essentially just wire baskets, but they're really expensive. At a couple local nurseries, one garden cloche costs like 15 bucks just for one. And so of all the different options available to me, what buys me a little bit of time to build a fence, which is probably the direction we're going to, is probably a cloche. I thought, maybe I can just make one out of chicken wire or hardware cloth. We got plenty of that stuff lying around. Until I ran across one of these things. This is at Dollar Tree, and it costs literally a little over $1. It cost $1.25 for one of these, which I was weighing it in my head. I was like, okay, I could make dozens of these for all of our tender plants, and cut out the hardware cloth or the chicken wire with my bum hand, my bum wrist, or I could spend a little over $1 a piece on one of these things. I figured this was worth it. This was worth it to spend a little bit over $1. So say I get 30 of them, you know, for 30 different veg, that's $30. It's not a lot of money for these things. I'll show you how I intend these to work. All right, so say this stick is a new veggie start that we have. It looks really tempting and succulent to a free-range chicken walking around. Well, just pop this sucker over it, get some landscape staples, which I have many of them lying around, pop those in just to hold the thing down, maybe put in one on each corner, and that's not going anywhere. The chickens aren't gonna bother with that. This, obviously, our plants are gonna get much bigger, and these little tiny makeshift cloches, I think these were just waste bins, little $1 wireframe waste bins. They're not gonna contain this plant, this start, once it gets big. And that's fine, because by that time, I hope to have a fence up, number one, and number two, the plants will be hardy enough to withstand a little bit of pecking from 2 or 3 curious free-range chickens wandering around. So I think I bought 6 of these just because I wanted to test it out in the garden. I'm probably gonna buy a bunch more of these things. Again, they're a little over $1 a piece. Worth it for my starts. If I get starts that are bigger, sometimes you'll buy tomato plants that are already pretty big off the ground. I'll make those out of my chicken wire and hardware cloth. I'll just make kind of custom cloches for those bigger plants. But in the meantime, I don't think the chickens are gonna bother with what's lying underneath these, and they're not going anywhere. They're held into place with those landscape pins. I think that's my solution. We'll see how it works. As with everything here, we'll see how it works. That's the new motto for the modern yeoman. We'll see how it works. My sister also gifted me with some of these drop-over greenhouses that she didn't end up needing. So these look to be 4.5 feet by 4.5 feet. So these will be great to put over bigger spans of our garden as well, just to keep those nosy chickens away from our young plants as they grow. Also, one other interesting little side note here. Apparently, Nana Jana and Holly had started a couple of experimental early greens a few weeks ago, and I forgot completely about them. And the chickens have steered clear of them. They haven't bugged them at all. They seem pretty healthy. We've got ourselves some arugula and some kale, some spinach, a couple of other things in rows. Again, these were meant as just an experimental start very early in the season, knowing that we have a few frosts on the way. And the chickens haven't came in and pecked at them at all. They just weren't interested in them. So there are some plants that I just don't think the chickens are going to be terribly interested in. I'm just thinking of those young veggie starts. Those are my primary concern. One other question I get, what's up with the pig stall? Well, the pig stall's ready. The pig stall is all ready to go. I just need to add straw, probably some mulch on the bottom. Everything in this pig stall is ready to go. I changed out the studs, you'll remember, a couple of months ago. I put in a new door. I put on these sheet metal panels as kind of a guard against rough and tumble nosy pigs. The only thing I need to concern myself about now is actually getting a fenced-in area for the piglets to live in once we get piglets. This is what we did with Frank and Beans a few years back. You might remember that they actually lived in that stall at the time where currently the meat chickens are living. And they had run of the north lean-to out here for a few months before we started moving them around. This year I might look into a little bit of a different system. I'm thinking of a stationary pen, a sty as it were, but using deep bedding so we don't get the stink and the smell. But that will require building a fairly large penned-in area, much bigger than what you see this fence around here. And this actually ties into my earlier point about fencing around the garden. I may put this fencing that's currently here, this Premier One fencing around the garden, once those plants get a little bit bigger. I'm a little less worried about how the free-range chickens will deal with them because they're hardier and they're bigger. And so yes, I know that they can slip through this fencing. I know that the rungs are big enough for them to slip through, but I'll be okay with that when the plants are bigger. So what about this area? What am I going to do here? A couple of things. There's the chickens, obviously. Do I keep the chickens in with the pigs? And I've got chickens on the way. I'll talk about that next. I've got more chickens that are going to hatch in 3 days. Do I keep them in here with piglets or do I keep them separate? That's something I need to do a little bit more research on. I know pigs and chickens can live together. You'll often, if you visit a farm and you look at a pig pen, You'll see chickens go in there and pick around and look at their poop and eat their stuff. That's very common, but living together, actually sleeping next to each other, that's a question I haven't explored much. So if they can't, I'll move all my meat chickens back into the A-frame that I have, that I built for meat chickens, and just start moving them around the property until they're ready to process. But if they can live together, then they'll live right next to each other, and that would be great. But again, that will require a fairly large penned-in area. So what I'll probably do, use a combination of T-posts and wooden posts, use pig paneling, and just build this out a good ways north of the lean-to itself, maybe out to here. I want it to be fairly large to give them space to have a wallow, to give them space to pile up the deep bedding, and give them space to forage for stuff down here. It's something I'm still looking into, and honestly, when it comes down to it, there's no urgency around pigs. This is a long-term project. If we have to wait another year to finally get piglets, but we have the infrastructure all ready to go, I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to be patient for them. But in the meantime, we got a lot of poultry to deal with, and that's what I want to talk about next. For the folks that watched the previous video, the Work With Me Wednesday, thank you. I really appreciate you tagging along with me on Wednesdays. It's always fun. They're a little bit more relaxed vibe than these Sunday videos. But in that previous Work With Me Wednesday video, we set up the brooder stall here in the barn because as it stands of today, there are 3 days left before our breast meat chicks hatch. They're currently in the incubator and they're in the lockdown period, which means there's 3 days before they're ready to go. Speaking of chicks, it sounds like there's a young bird chirping around here. So we got the brooder ready. The brooder, I'm not gonna open it now, but it's got fresh pine shavings in there. It's got the spot for their food and water. It's got a heater panel, and we've also got their heat lamp here ready to go. And I also wanted to call out my viewer, Dwight, for giving me a super thanks on that Wednesday, Work With Me Wednesday video. And one of the things he mentioned, he's like, you need to get a heavy duty extension cord, an outdoor use professional extension cord, especially for stuff in here. I was like, you're right, that's something I've been looking at for a long time. So I used that super thanks money to get a professional heavy duty contractor grade cord with multiple outlets. I'll be using this in here. The outlet is right around the corner. I'll be using this in here to power the lights, the panel, and any other things that I need to plug into here. This is incredible gift. Thank you so much, Dwight. We really appreciate your viewership and your chipping in to help with the Homestead. We'll put this to use right away. In the meantime, I'm ready to go. When those chicks start hatching, they got a place to live, and we'll spring into chick duty. Tis the season. It's spring. Time for some chicks. The apple trees are looking better than they've ever looked before. This is the first time I ever pruned it, and I sprayed it with the copper early, and I think it made a really good difference. The blooms are starting to fall off, but the blooms that we did see were really pretty and they smelled great. This is the best this apple tree has ever looked for us in the 3 years that we've had it, 2 years that we've had it. It's looking good. Let's check on this one. This one's a little scragglier, but the vegetation that comes out looks very healthy, spot free. I'm pleased. One thing that I think is helping this year is we haven't really seen those little Fraggle Rock cedar rust balls on all the cedars that we have around. Something about this year's conditions, it's been kind of a weird winter and a weird early spring, may have shortened the typical lifespan of the cedar rust virus that typically plagues all of our cedars every year. So I'd imagine that's making a pretty good difference on our apple trees as well. What's the new model? We'll just have to see. We'll just have to wait and see how it goes. All right, the moment that you guys have been waiting for, and the moment that's dominated my thoughts for the past 2 months, and that's getting the attic spray foamed with closed cell spray foam. And the very first thing that I'll say, I mentioned earlier in the video that today's a warm one, a hot one. It's close to 90 degrees Fahrenheit today. And on a day like today, prior to having this spray foam, it would already be roasting up here. I would imagine it'd be close to 100, if not higher, on a day like today. Because we have a metal roof, it bakes everything in the attic. I don't think the metal roof even matters. When you're up in an attic on a 90-degree sunny day, that attic is going to get boiling, broiling. And so, as I mentioned multiple times, we couldn't do anything in the warm months just because it was way too hot in here. Even with an air conditioner, that wasn't enough. So let me say, the very first thing that I'll point out is that it's cool in here. Not cool because we don't have an air conditioner, but it's livable. I'd say it's somewhere in the high 70s up here right now, as opposed to around 100. That's livable to me. Now, what are we going to do? Obviously, we've got to decide what sort of paneling we're going to put up here. Right now, we're leaning towards tongue and groove. Build this place out. That's going to take, I don't know how long it's going to take, but that's phase 2 of our plan. And once we have everything finished up here, then we're going to put an air conditioner in, probably a window unit. I'd imagine that would do the trick. And then probably a dehumidifier as well. That's one thing the spray foam company told us, was that you're still going to want to air condition it up here. It's just that this space will hold that air conditioning, whereas before it wouldn't. Before we had this type of insulation, it would not. And probably a dehumidifier as well. So between those two things, I think we'll be very comfortable up here in the middle of the summer, in the hottest months. How did it go? It went really well. The company that we worked with, they're called Koala Insulation out of Knoxville. They did a great job. They were honest with us. They told us what would and wouldn't work. They gave us multiple options. We ended up just going with this room. The rest of the house, the main part of the house, still has the insulation on in between the ceiling joists. And that's working fine for down there. But this part of just this section is the only thing that's been spray foamed. It was a very reasonable price. We were surprised at how inexpensive it was considering some of our other options. And so they showed up and filled in everything within about half a day. So they got here at about 8:30 in the morning, and at about 1, they were done. There was one guy spray foaming in here. They ran in a hose through that window. They had parked their truck off in the yard down there. They parked their truck down there, ran a hose up through here, and as one guy sprayed, and I wish I would have gotten video. I was going to get some video after lunch, but they had already finished by that point. So one guy was spraying, and the guy behind him was scraping the rafter beams as they were going along, because we want these rafter beams exposed so we can put tongue and groove in later and pop it in. And they finished it really quick. Like I said, by 1 o'clock, they were done already. And I'm thoroughly impressed. We still have those concerns. You know, what happens if there's a leak somewhere? We won't really know about it. So I've got to be vigilant in checking the roof every once in a while from the outside, from the exterior, just to make sure that there's no visible rust spots or screws that are sticking up, and that, you know, there's no holes that have pierced the roof or anything like that. And it was a risk that we were willing to take because it's just this small portion of the house. And so far, just from being up here and standing up here, I'm glad we took that risk, because it is so comfortable in here compared to what it would be had we not done this. This was a good investment. I'm glad we did this. Now, on to the next point, and that's actually finishing this room, which of course we'll document here on the channel. This will be a project, but once it's done, this room is going to be incredible. So, am I happy that we decided to go with this closed cell spray foam? I am. I'm very happy. I would do it again. You might be wondering if it's stinky, and actually surprisingly it's not that bad at all. I wasn't supposed to be in the house during the actual spray itself, so I was off doing other things. And then after they were done, they said it typically will off gas for a few hours. We had a fan up here blowing the scent out, but I could come back in and check. And after 3 hours after they were done, I came back in and I couldn't smell it at all downstairs. When I came up here, it's a faint smell, but the smell is so marginal to where I don't think it'll bug us at all. So I think within a few days, I'm going to keep this window open. I'll probably bring the fan back. Within a few days, I think the scent will be completely gone. So in terms of the smell, not really an issue at all. Thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. I've got a lot of land I want to clear this late afternoon and not much sun left to do it with. So I'm going to put a cap in our day today. And by the next time you see me on Wednesday, hopefully it will be with newly hatched meat chicks. So thanks for hanging out with us. And until we see you again on Wednesday, remember, as always, slowly, slowly.